where best friends and next-door neighbors, Willow and Lillian, spill the tea on murder, mysteries, and other things that go bump in the night. So get your favorite teacup ready, and let's get into it. Welcome to Cruelty Podcast. This is Lillian, and with me is Willow.
Hello.
I wanted to see how long I could do it, and then I got bored halfway through. I don't know what's going on. Hope you guys are doing well, teabags. I feel like I haven't recorded in 100 years, but it was just like a couple days ago. Yeah. I don't know what's going on with my brain. It's soup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, things are okay. I don't...
Don't say that. Knock on wood.
Oh, no, I'm just going to keep thinking they're okay, and they're going to be okay. Usually, like, we have, like, catastrophe
We're juggling tornadoes most of the time.
Good God, the juggling.
Honestly, the more people I talk to, the more I think that is just normal. I think that anytime we're experiencing some bullshit, most of the people out there is as well. So high five, y'all.
Yeah, high five. We're continuing our Murder for Hire month. And take it away, Willow. What are you doing?
What am I doing?
What are you doing?
So tonight's case is on the Iceman, Richard Kuklinski. Trigger warnings for this case. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's just graphic. There's a lot of just graphic shit.
Yeah.
Sexual assault, sexual violence, domestic assault, domestic violence, descriptions of injuries, dismemberment, and animal cruelty.
All right.
So, yeah. So Richard Kuklinski, better known as the Iceman, would go down as one of the most notorious hitmen in American history. A lot of times, especially because of the HBO series, when you think of the word hitman, you usually think of this guy. Like, you get his image in your head.
As a matter of fact, I do.
Yeah. This is the first person I thought of whenever I thought of this month.
I want to say, like, 6 requests for this case.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, well, good. Well, hi. Here we are.
And you're welcome.
Yeah. I stumbled across this case on HBO a long time ago, just, I don't know, folding laundry or something. And his mannerisms drew me in. Like, the way that he spoke, I don't know. I was just drawn in, and I was like, who is this guy? I have to know more. So he allegedly worked for the Gambino crime family for over 30 years and had over 200 hits performed, considering him a human killing machine. Though after his death in 2006, a member of the arresting task force said, quote, "I checked every one of those murders that Kuklinski said he had committed, and not one of them were true. Authorities throughout the country could not corroborate one case based on the tidbits Kuklinski had given." Another member of the task force later said, quote, "I don't believe he killed 200 people. I don't believe he killed 100 people. I'll go as high as 15, maybe." So everything in this episode should be taken with a grain of salt.
A big one.
Everything.
I always am confounded when people confess to things they didn't do and when they just straight up invent murders that didn't happen.
That's why I think that this HBO series is a really good series to watch, to pay attention to.
Thing over again. Yeah.
It's really just, from a psychological standpoint, it's very interesting.
It's fascinating. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. So if you haven't heard of them or haven't seen them before, after he was incarcerated, Richard Kuklinski did a series of in-depth interviews. Like, all of these interviews were days on days on days worth of videoing. The first one was called The Iceman Tapes, Conversations with a Killer, and this debuted in 1992. In 2001, he did another interview called The Iceman Confesses Secrets of a Mafia Hitman. Later on in 2003, he released The Iceman and the Psychiatrist, where a psychiatrist and an FBI consultant named Dr. Park Dietz sat down with Richard for 13 hours over a span of 4 days, speaking to him about the murders and what it was like inside of his minds during the killings. Like, he really got in depth with some of his questions. And I remember at one point during the interview, Richard was just like getting kind of annoyed at you. And you
and
know,
that was just so scary because I have seen this documentary.
It is,
by the
yeah.
way.
And then like you could hear the interviewer just like, okay, well, let's why? Let's think about why. Let's consider why you're getting upset with me. And
no murdering.
Let's look at this. Yeah.
It was very chilling the way he said it. He went from pretty affable and talking to just cold, like shut up.
Yeah.
And it really
and
it
you
did
could
chill
see
me
the
for
trigger.
Sure. Yeah.
You could see it
click.
Physically happen.
It was creepy
as
shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was when he mentioned like if killing this person did anything, like if it helped anything, if it solved anything. And he was just kind of like, motherfucker, I'll kill you and see what happens. Kind of like,
yeah,
you know, and it was just
creepy.
Like, oh.
But then you have, given what we know about this case, you have to think, was he just
right? We don't know.
We don't know.
And I think that I want to get into more of the mystery towards the end once we talk about everything. I kind of want to just see what everybody's idea is because, again, we don't know.
And we never will.
Yeah. So the interview opens, this particular interview, by saying, if I understand correctly, you're positive you killed more than 50 people. And he says, definitely. And you think you killed more than 100 people? Definitely. Are you sure about that one? Definitely. But not sure that it's more than 200 people. He says, I wouldn't say definitely to that. So he's like, maybe yes, maybe no. He says, I would say less than 200 people. And he's like, okay, you tell me. Like, he's going back and forth. And he's like really kind of playing him here. And then all of a sudden he like cracks a smile. He like smirks. And he says, it's not less than 200 people. So the guy's like, okay, so you killed more than 200 people. And he's like, sure. Yep. I killed basically 100 people when I was a young man before I even knew anybody. Too much. At one point in my life, I killed people for basically nothing. For somebody to look at me wrong. If I would kill him, or he says I would kill him, stab him, shoot him. And the interviewer says, you tended to shoot people close up and personal. He says, definitely. I wanted to tell them. Just before they left, I wanted to say goodbye. He went on to say that he liked to kill people up close and personal so that the last thing that they saw was, as he put it, his pretty face. So that they knew that when they got to wherever they were going, he sent them there.
Fuck.
He enjoyed watching them die. He watched their eyes as they faded to nothing. He says, quote, I saw the surprise, the shock, the blank, and then they were gone. And all I saw was my own reflection. The thing I personally find very interesting about Richard Kuklinski, which I think sets him apart from most killers that we've discussed on this podcast, is that he doesn't get anything out of killing. Like, at least so he says. He's spoken many a times on many interviews saying that killing didn't affect him in any way, that he got no thrill or satisfaction from harming anyone, ever. Dr. Dietz went on to ask him about adrenaline rushes, like really trying to push the boundaries of what he believes is feeling, right? Mm-hmm. Because any person would feel something. Something.
Not nothing.
Not nothing.
Even a psychopath going to feel something.
Exactly. And that's usually why they're killing, is to either feel something or, to
accomplish
seek something. Yes, absolutely. So he went on to say, if I were to beat somebody up, it would do nothing for me. If I knocked them down, I stepped over them. That's why you see it doesn't bother me. I don't care to hurt anyone. It does nothing for me, killing somebody else. He said he felt nothing when he killed and that it was disappointing, that he thought that he should feel something and that he was disappointed that he didn't feel anything. He said, that's when I knew I must be crazy, because I figured some of them, I should have felt some sort of feeling, something, but there was nothing. It was almost as if there was an emptiness where a part of his soul should be, and it seemed as though through all these killings that he was searching for that place deep down inside of him. Like there was a part of him that was paralyzed, that he just couldn't feel, and that he was searching to kind of fill that void with some sort of feeling. And he just never really found that. It's as though this violent, essential search for feeling stemmed deep from his early childhood, which we see on, most killers. And Yeah, this case, before I get into his early childhood, this case is a really great case for psychology, for psychiatric studies. I know that we do have a lot of listeners out there that are in forensic psychology and different courses like that. So definitely suggest you check out those interviews. Now, he was born in the mid-1930s in Jersey City, New Jersey. His father, Stanley, was a Polish immigrant, and his mother, Anna, was a first-generation Irish. She was a devout Catholic. His father was a brakeman for the railroad, and his mother worked in a meat packaging factory, and she raised the 4 children. Anna, being the devout Catholic that she was extremely strict and made sure that all of her children went to Mass, kept their studies, and even Richard was an altar boy. Stanley was an extremely abusive, alcoholic father. He would beat his wife Anna in front of the children, and as soon as the children grew at least old enough in his eyes, he would start to beat them too. He left the family when the children were still very small, but he would frequently get drunk and come over just to unleash his violence upon them. In 1940, when Richard was just 5 years old, he witnessed his father beat his 7-year-old brother, Florian, to death.
Oh, my God.
Right in front of him and all of his family.
Yeah, that would fuck you up,
right?
obviously.
Knowing that your father could do that.
Yeah, it'd be terrifying.
Knowing that you're just 2 years younger, like that could happen to you at any point.
I'm assuming, didn't go to jail for it.
No, he covered it up. He said that he told the authorities that his brother, that the 7-year-old child had just fallen down the stairs and it was an accident, and he got away with it instantly. So all of his children saw that.
Unless, of course, that's a lie, but we'll move forward.
Grain of salt?
Grain of salt.
Grain of salt. Now, there are records that this child has died, so...
Yeah, but whether it was an accident, mishap, or on purpose, we'll never know.
Right. But, I mean, his father was very violent, so I wouldn't put it past him. His younger brother, Joseph Michael, was convicted in 1970 for sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl named Pamela Dial. Then he murdered her and her dog by throwing them out of a 5-story building. When Richard was asked about his brother's crimes, he replied simply, "We came from the same father." But the thing is that the whole household was hardened by Stanley. After the ruthless abuse that she endured by her husband, Richard's mother, Anna, turned to beating the children as well. So the children got it from both sides. There was no protection in this family
no
whatsoever.
safe space for them at all.
Absolutely not. She would beat the children with household items like broom handles, oftentimes breaking the broom handles over her children in the process. As a preteen, Richard later recalled an argument between his parents in which his mother attempted to kill his father with a kitchen knife, which I think is safe to say at this point in his life was probably a fairly normal experience. Most people who study this case point back to his father being the reason that Richard became completely emotionless and a just brutal killer. But I truly believe it was a combination of both of his parents. I think that, yes, his father being as violent and chaotic and abusive that he was, obviously left some huge mark on him. But his mother taking that abuse and redirecting the abuse that she was receiving and putting that on her children, I think he learned that if you get hit, you hit back.
Yeah.
So it was a very fair combination of the two. Richard began reenacting his parents' cruelty on animals as young as about 10 years old. Something that we'd obviously expect to see in the household that he grew up in. With Richard, anything smaller than him was dead. And still, he had no feeling whatsoever. He said that he liked to do this apparently quite frequently, where he would take 2 cats and tie their tails together. Trigger warning. He would tie their tails together and throw them over a clothing line, watch as the 2 cats dangled by their tails, attacking one another, ripping each other to shreds, and eventually falling down and running off. Apparently, he would do this all the time. He would also find these neighborhood cats and take them down into the basement of the building where they would have the furnace, because it's an old, inner city apartment building. the wood burning furnace at the basement level. And he would take neighborhood cats and strays that he would find, place them into the incinerator with a book of matches, and just watch the cats as they ran around on fire until they stopped running.
That's fucked.
He would also find dogs in the neighborhood, throw them off the roof just for fun. He would take them and he would tie them to buses and watch the city buses drag them. He would just inflict pain on the most helpless creatures around him, just as his parents had done to him. And when he reflected back as an adult, he realized that he didn't get much enjoyment from harming helpless animals. As a kid, he was generally disgusted with himself afterwards. He attributed it to like childhood boredom. He attributed it to, just being a kid and not having anything else to do. And, when you see that much violence in your household, you go outside and you do what you think is normal. And that's what he just thought was normal. But eventually he grew up and he grew older and he grew out of, quote unquote, playing with animals, and he moved on to his peers. Most teenagers are obviously bullied from time to time, but it just goes with the territory, But by the time that Richard was a teenager, he had already learned what it was like to be bullied and taken advantage of and ridiculed by his parents. So now, by the time that normal kids are kind of like branching out and teasing each other and seeing what they can get away with, by now he's hardened. By a young teenager, young adolescent, he's already ready to fight.
That makes sense.
Right? So he was basically conditioned to fight back from ages 5 to 10. And so by the time he was a teenager, anybody that crossed him or pissed him off in any type of way was subject to extreme violence. His first alleged kill was when he was only 14 years old. And then at that point, he began murdering homeless people for practice, as he put it. Again, we have no bodies to prove this, but it is something that he said quite frequently. At one point, he said that he was just walking down the street and he decided that he just didn't like this guy for whatever reason. So he followed him. This man was with a group of people, and the group of people went into a bar. He stayed behind to urinate on the side of the building. And so Richard followed him back into the alleyway. He waited until this man stopped peeing and grabbed a clothing line. Because you know how like the clothing lines drape in between the buildings? He grabbed a clothing line, allegedly, wrapped it around the man's throat from behind, back to back, used his body as the leverage. He said he used his body as the hanging tree.
Jesus.
And held this man against his back, strangling him until his body kicked, twitched, and then eventually went limp. And he said that he held him there until he knew for a fact that that man was dead.
How old did he say he was when he did that?
It was before he was 20.
Mm.
So late teens.
I mean, it's possible.
It really is. I don't know. I do believe that the body was found in that alleyway because he just left it there. So we don't know.
We don't know.
One time he was in Georgia driving just around, and while he was driving on the street, there was a couple vans full of people that were obviously traveling together. They were probably drunk. They were weaving in between cars, driving extremely recklessly, nearly ran Richard off the road. And, well, Richard just wasn't the guy to fuck with. And he didn't like these people. So he pulled his car over to the side of the road. He got out. He went into his trunk. He pulled out a gun. And he stood at the end of his car just waiting for these two vans that were just kind of driving around being crazy. These two vans pulled up beside him, I guess thinking that he was threatening them in some sort of way, which he was. He said, quote, "Apparently their eyesight mustn't be too good because I don't think I'd walk up to a guy with a .357 standing by his side. But these fellas did. Foolish mistake. They all died. And I didn't even know them." The interviewer asked how many. He says, "A few of them I reloaded and killed every single one of them." So along with the alleged murders, Richard delved into the world of petty crimes as well. Things that you would expect him to get into: burglary, gambling, pornography distribution, which is something that we don't talk about in the criminal world very much because, we live in the age of technology.
Mm-hmm.
But in the 1950s, the 60s, the 70s, and into the 80s, pornography was a huge thing.
Well, let's be clear. It still is.
It still is, but you know what I mean.
It was more black market, harder to get a hold of, especially niche kinks and stuff like that. Right. I'd actually like to cover...
Yeah, we talked about it on the Betty Page episode on Patreon. We just kind of touched about it. But yeah, it's a whole other world, like a criminal world. Especially in those times.
Because, where it was mostly banned and not regulated.
Right, because you couldn't just look at porn on your phone. You had to have physical copies of it.
Yep. Y'all, people went to like little theaters.
Little peep shows?
Peep shows. You'd pay a quarter.
Yeah.
They still, I'm from Tulsa originally. And by the airport, there's a strip club there called the Landing Strip. Gotta love the name.
Love
you
that.
Just do.
Mm-hmm.
I used to go there all the time because I like strippers. And next door to it was a little coin-operated porno theater.
God, that's
you didn't want to sit in those seats. They was sticky. But I used to go in there all the time just because it just amused me.
Yeah.
I just find, I don't know, I'm a weirdo. I find sex and all of its trappings quite amusing all of the time.
Trappings.
Yes, indeed. I used a big word.
Jesus Christ.
I'm going to shut up.
It's okay. No, but I like that we talked about it because the illegal porn industry has a lot of the background of this case.
It still do.
Yeah.
It's worse.
It's
now.
worse now because
we won't talk about it because I'll throw up.
Yeah. So in the mid-60s, he worked at the Manhattan Film Lab, making copies of popular films to sell. He started out making bootleg Disney films, which somehow led him straight into pornography. Apparently, this copying and bootlegging porn made him quite a bit of money and a number of friends who would later become colleagues, and some of them turned victims. He started a burglary group with a handful of people that he, criminals in the area that he gathered together, his friends and whatnot. And together they formed this burglary gang. I don't know why that sounds so cheesy. I'm sure it was pretty hardcore, but they had a back room and a storefront that was literally called The Store.
The Store.
I know. I was like, wow, are you sure?
We could call it something else. How about the Mercantile?
Anything else.
It certainly sounds fancier that way. Means the same thing.
Right. But yeah, this was kind of one of his many quote unquote lucrative side hustles that he had throughout his adult life. This whole process of either stealing film or photos or stealing objects from people's homes and then reselling it. Now, according to Richard, by the time he was in his 20s, he had made quite the name for himself as someone essentially not to fuck with. And apparently the mob took notice of this and hired him for his first hit. Now, allegedly, a man came to him, brought him a picture, and told him essentially where to find this man that he was looking for. He said that this man in the picture always smoked these really big Churchill cigars. So Richard went out to the places that he said that he frequent and found the man in the picture. He said that he pulled up beside him at a stoplight. He was on his motorcycle, and the man was in a car with the window rolled down, smoking his cigar. Richard casually turned to the man and said, "Cuban? Are they Cuban? Looks like a pretty good cigar." Then the man just turned to him, and Richard says, quote, "And he wasn't a happy camper." He turned and said, "Fuck you." And when he said, "Fuck you," he had turned to look my way, as he says, and I got a clear shot of his face, and it was the picture I had of the man that they wanted. And so I said, "Nah, fuck me. Don't fuck me. Fuck you." And when he said, "Fuck you," he pulled out his gun, shot the man in the face, And apparently his head just blew up like a pumpkin. And as soon as he pulled the trigger, the light turned green and off he went. And that was
Jesus.
that. Mm-hmm. He said that, that was it. Like, he went back, he got the money, and from then on, he was kind of their go-to hitman. Now, in the interview with the psychiatrist, they talk a lot about how he is able to detach himself from his feelings, have no feelings, or simply just cannot care. Richard said that if he cared, he'd have baggage, and you just can't move quickly with all that extra weight. Caring made him vulnerable and soft, so he chose not to care at all. Not allow himself to be able to be affected in any way. He was methodical with his killings. He thought through the entire process so that he got the job done as seamlessly as possible, making sure to follow the rules of the operation. If like you needed to go do a hit and bring something back to confirm or what have you, he would do that. He said that, if certain individuals needed to be tortured, he would torture them and then bring back proof. He talked about one time putting a man in a cave and tying him up and watching the rats eat him alive. We'll talk about that later.
Like you do.
Yeah. But either way, he kind of got it down to like a very clean science almost. Like, he did not make a lot of mess. It never got on his clothes. And it helped that he was white and, well, not that. Anyways, he was Irish and, not part of the Gambino family. So it helped that he wasn't even like seen as anywhere related to these people. So if he was really their hitman, again, grain of salt, but if he was really their hitman, it would make sense that they would hire him because he's in no way, shape, or form related to anybody or any form of the business. Anyways.
Jesus.
It's just so weird because, like, in researching this case, I'm gullible. I'm 1,000%
That's true.
The most gullible person on this planet.
Uh-huh.
If you tell me something, I believe you wholeheartedly until I know otherwise.
Yeah.
And so, like, halfway through this research, I found out that, like, all these people were like, nah, dude. Like, nah. But nobody came out and spoke against him until after he died.
Yeah, they were scared of him, is why. Would be my guess.
I guess so. Like, I don't know. It's just so strange to me.
It's weird.
It
is
is
weird.
So I just don't know how I feel about anything right now. But to him, he didn't have a formal education. He did not have any formal training. To him, the, black market sales and the killings and all of this, it put food on the table. And now allegedly he said that each of his mob killings was about, close to 10 grand each. And so, you're killing that many people a year. Like, so he said that he worked for all 5 of the crime families. And it's alleged that he had anywhere from a few dozen hits under his belt to upwards of 100 per year, allegedly. Now, his dismemberments were, we do have, some kills and dismemberments. So we do know at least some of the evidence.
Yes.
And from what we can tell, his dismemberments were very clean. Precision cuts, very little blood, never got on his clothes. He'd wrap each piece with plastic, oftentimes putting them on ice or in cold places to mess with the time of death, hence the name. Whatever his weapon of choice for that day was, he was swift and clean about it. He always used a butcher knife to dismember. He never used a chainsaw because he said it was way too messy. He said that he always carried at least 3 weapons on him: a gun on his hip, a knife in his pocket, and a larger gun with a silencer on his leg. Other weapons of choice included crossbow, ice picks, remote-controlled bombs, grenades, and cyanide. Again, wouldn't we know? I'm just saying. So,
yeah.
Cyanide, though, did seem to be his favorite. He particularly liked cyanide spray, which I just think is creepy.
So it's something the KGB would use for sure.
I don't like it.
No.
Oh, I do not like it.
No.
So the mind-boggling thing about this case, in at least in my point of view, is that like many other killers that we've talked about, he had a whole family life at home, and no one knew vice versa. Like nobody in the criminal world knew that he had a family, and nobody in his family knew that he was a criminal. And he really got away with it for several decades. He met and married his first wife, Linda, in early adulthood. They had 2 sons together, and soon after, while he was working for a trucking company, he met his second wife, a 19-year-old secretary named Barbara. He was 26 at the time, and Barbara even later said that being 19, she was very vulnerable. She was very young. She had never been in love before, and he was, I know 19 and 26 isn't that big of an age gap, but at that young of an age, it is. And he knew better.
Yeah, I agree.
And he definitely, they only dated for a couple months. Like, he hooked her. He was very sweet to her at the very beginning. But by the time he had roped her in just a couple months, he was threatening her life. He told her that he would kill her mother and her sister if she didn't marry him. She married him within months. And soon after, one after the other, she had 3 children by him. She had 2 daughters and a son. Now, the majority of the time, the family was happy. His wife never questioned what he did for work. They lived in nice middle class, in a nice middle class house in a nice middle class neighborhood. They had a very charming curb appeal. You know, the kids went to a great school. They got good grades. The wife was happy. Richard came home to a warm meal and, you know, smiling faces, and it just seemed like he had the perfect life. He took his family to church every Sunday. They went on family vacations to Disney World. He had big, huge barbecue cookouts with all the neighbors. Like, his house was filled with family photos of like smiling faces and all these different vacation destinations, and it just was so picturesque, like a magazine. And underneath it all was just pure violence and rage.
It's weird to me, and I don't like it.
Barbara describes it as, quote unquote, good Richie and bad Richie. One of his daughters, she said that the good Richie was very affectionate and loving, and bad Richie was obviously very chaotic and abusive. One of his daughters later recalled a time when she was little, she had stuck her hand in hot tea that her mother had just prepared for her father. And just being a little girl, just being like, oh, what's that? Like, reached her hand in there. Yeah. It burnt her hand. Well, Richard overheard from the other room his daughter crying over her burnt hand. He stormed into the kitchen. He saw what had happened. And he proceeded to beat her mother ruthlessly in front of this little girl. My God. Yelling and screaming about, you know, like, how dare you put this dangerous object in, you know, within reach? Like, it's all her fault. Like, it wasn't just an accident.
Yeah, it's fucked.
And she couldn't do anything. Like, she's just a small child. But she remembers that point being like, okay, this isn't normal. This can't be normal. Like, this isn't how people live. Barbara later said that he never physically abused the children, but he was very emotionally abusive, stating that one time when one of his daughters was a teenager, he killed his daughter's Samoyed dog in front of her because she came home late.
Yeah, it's fucked.
What the absolute fuck?
That's fucked.
Like, I mean, all dogs are great and no dog should ever be harmed, but I don't know if you know what a Samoyed dog is. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, Samoyeds are...
Is that how you say it? Samoyed?
Samoyeds is how I say it. I may be saying it wrong because I've never heard anyone say it.
They're one of my favorites. They're so cute. They're big and white and they have big smiling faces.
Yes, but any dog murdered...
No, I know, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not saying it either way, but I'm just saying that, like, that's a big dog.
It is a big dog.
My God.
It'd be a mess.
Just, and white fur, I don't know.
It's just awful.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Murdered her dog in front of her to teach her a lesson. He would just randomly fly into a rage, breaking furniture, throwing things at his family members. At one point, Barbara had had enough and told him that she wasn't happy in their marriage, clearly, and that she wanted to see other people. Richard went silent, and without her realizing what happened, he had grabbed a hunting knife, stabbed her in the back. It was so sharp that she didn't feel the blade enter her body.
Jesus.
All she felt was his fist basically against her back. He leans into her ear and says that if you leave me, I'll kill you and our whole family. And then she realizes that there's a knife blade in her back. She starts screaming and kicking and, trying to fight back. So he grabs her. He throws her down to the ground. She hits her head and passes out and goes unconscious. Luckily, she doesn't bleed out. And she survives. But what the absolute fuck? And it's just one of those things where he just repeated over and over and over again that he didn't want to be his parents. And there he was, turning into his parents.
Absolutely. Without therapy,
right,
and without addressing the cycles of abuse,
right,
you're just bound to continue them.
Yeah. I mean, it's not his fault what happened to him as a child, but
it's sure as fuck his fault now.
Exactly.
It's a reason, not an excuse.
My heart hurts for that little boy that got beat by his dad and his mother.
My heart hurts for his children and
absolutely
his wife.
that have to experience the exact same thing that he experienced. I will say that his children have completely broken the cycle.
That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But he wouldn't just beat his wife. He also beat himself. He would go into this rage in front of his children and just start punching himself, punching his body, punching himself in the head over and over and over and over again, to the point where his daughters would beg him to stop. They said that they could see his face shaking with each blow. They just knew he was hitting himself with all of his might. Just some extreme psychological torture there. When his oldest daughter, Merrick, was fairly young, he sat her down and, almost like a confessional style, told her in detail about how he had this bully in school that, had just bullied him enough, said the wrong thing. He had gone home, gotten a clothing rod, and went and beat the boy to death. And it almost like confessed to his daughter that he had killed someone.
Oh, that's weird.
It was before she was 13, so she was young. And it's why? Yeah,
shut up.
I don't know if he actually did this, actually killed the boy, but I feel like opening up to his daughter about this was for some sort of reason. I don't know, because his daughter Merrick, he was actually a little bit more closer to, and I don't know what he was trying to do, if he was trying to form a bond in their relationship, but she felt really bad for him when he told her this. He was crying, and she felt oh my God, my dad is broken. My dad is suffering, that this is, some sort of burden that my dad is carrying. And she began to feel really bad for him. And then by the time she was 13, and the violence in the household had, gotten more and more, frequent, he sat her down again and told her that if anything happened, that if he ended up hurting their mother to the point of killing her, that he would sadly have to kill the children as well. And he said that killing Merrick would have been the hardest one. He said because of their relationship. And to put that burden on your 13-year-old daughter, who now feels as though she not only has to protect her father's sanity, but her mother and siblings' lives. The other daughter also feels as though she has to protect her mother's life at all costs, at all times. I don't know. These kids have the weight of their world on their shoulders, and they are worried that they are going to die at any given moment. Anything could happen. As his daughters grew up and grew older and into adulthood, they started to question what to do with their father. They knew what he was capable of, and the topic of murdering him so that he didn't murder anyone else did come up in conversation. But luckily, they didn't have to do that because soon enough his world would come to an end. His wife and kids said that they never knew what he did for work. All they knew is that he was, quote unquote, into wholesale distribution.
That sounds like, God, that sounds like the most organized crime thing ever.
Wholesale distribution.
Yes.
Uh-huh. So, though many of his crimes, at least his mob crimes are up to speculations, the killings we know of began with George Malaband in January of 1980. He had worked alongside Richard in many of his criminal endeavors, mostly with the stolen tapes. He was due to meet Richard on that day, but was never seen again, alive. His body was found in a 55-gallon drum a week later. Richard had cut his tendons in his legs so that way he could fit him in the drum more appropriately. The man was allegedly carrying around $27,000 in cash the day that he was murdered, but the cash was obviously never recovered. When asked, Richard said, quote, "It was due to business."
Okay.
Uh-huh. In 1982, Richard met a 51-year-old pharmacist named Paul Hoffman who frequented the store and its back room. He thought that this guy would be a perfect source for pharmaceutical drugs, so the two struck up a deal. Paul Hoffman was last seen on his way to meet Richard with around $25,000 for drugs in his pocket. Richard said that he lured this man into a garage, beat him to death with a tire iron, stuffed his body in a 55-gallon drum, and dumped it behind a motel. Richard later said that he watched this drum. Like, he would drive by and, just keep an eye on this drum behind the motel for a while until one day it was just gone. No one knows what happened to it. He doesn't even apparently know what happened to it. Paul Hoffman's body was never found, but Richard Kuklinski was, eventually, charged with this murder. By the early 80s, Richard's burglary
That word.
That's fun. Burglary ring was being investigated. One of his associates, Percy House, had been arrested and was talking. Richard believed that another one of his associates in the burglary gang, Gary Smith, was an informant. So he decided he needed to be silenced.
Yeah, I was figuring, he's just going to kill that guy.
Yeah. So this is one of the more infamous killings of his. This is one that would be told repetitively and be kind of made into a thing that he said that he'd done multiple times. Grain of salt. But he said that he got his burglary gang together in a motel room. Everybody has corroborated this, by the way. They got a motel room in New Jersey. He got everyone hamburgers, and the one hamburger without pickles went to Gary Smith. What do you think it had instead of pickles?
I think it had cyanide instead of pickles.
It did.
Oh, yum.
It really did. The group all ate their burgers, all of them watching in silence as their fellow teammates suffered from the poisoning. One of the other men there, Daniel Deppner, couldn't take the slow and agonizing death of his colleague, so he took the cord from the bedside lamp, wrapped it around his neck, and strangled him to death. They stuffed his body underneath the mattress and left it for housekeeping staff to find the next morning. Fantastic.
And that's part of where those stories started, by the way, of finding people stuffed under mattresses in hotel rooms.
Yep.
Yeah.
Had he just been poisoned, though, it would have probably looked more like an overdose, and it would have been an accidental death. But
the strangling
and the hiding of the body made this a homicide investigation. Now, Daniel Deppner, the one who had strangled the man with the cord, he was next, clearly. Richard persuaded him to go into hiding after killing Gary Smith, so he hid him in his daughter's apartment while her and her boyfriend were on vacation. There, at some point while they were gone, he killed him. When his daughter and her boyfriend got back, he made the boyfriend help carry the body out, which I just think is so fucking brash.
Right? God, the balls.
Yeah. He told this man that this dead body over here, this thing right here on your floor, that this man was a criminal who had some, bad dealings, and that someone had broken in, had a vendetta against him, and killed him. Daniel's body was found on May 14th, 1983 by a bicyclist in a wooded area outside of town. Medical examiner's report stated that it was likely that he was poisoned because his stomach was full of undigested food. Likely the food was laced.
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
And there were pinkish spots on his skin, which is consistent with cyanide poisoning. He was also strangled and dismembered, wrapped in green garbage bags, just 3 miles away from Richard's family home. In September of 1983, the body of a 50-year-old man named Louis Masquet was found in a town park in upstate New York. He was discovered with a single bullet hole in the back of his head. Turns out Louis Masquet had gone missing almost 2 years prior. In July of 1981, he was due to meet up with Richard Kuklinski to discuss some videotapes with around $95,000 in his pocket and was never seen again. Richard later admitted to killing him, storing him in a freezer for 15 months before dumping his body in the park. And that is how he got the name, the Iceman. Because he had wrapped the body in plastic, and even though it was September whenever they found the body, there was still ice on the body.
Oh, dang.
Mm-hmm. So now there are countless stories that he tells in all of his interviews about the work that he did with the mob. Like I said, grain of salt, not going to get into all of his mob murders, alleged mob murders, but I definitely suggest you watch the interviews. As far as the murders that we talked about, those are the only ones that we can actually have evidence and proof for. He claimed to have worked closely with the Gambino family, but a journalist named Gary Capici, who wrote many works on the five families, said that he claims the Iceman killed Paul Castellan, Carmine Galante, and Jimmy Hoffa, along with Roy DeMeo, and about 200 others. He says, come on, do you believe this? I don't know anyone that believes this. No one. And he's very involved with the crime families. One former mob member said that Richard was a pathological liar, and he said, quote, I spent 25 years in that life on the street. I never heard his name mentioned once. Not once. Again, no bodies were ever discovered for the crimes that he wasn't committed for. He said that he left their bodies in caves and watched the rats eat them, but local cave experts disagree completely, saying that cave rats wouldn't just eat another human being in front of another human being. Like, they're scared of humans. They wouldn't just come out to eat, that they hide to eat. And he also said that all of these caves in this area are all regulated. They are all well maintained. Mm-hmm. Most of them have guided tours. Not a single cave in the entire area, every one of them has been scouted and documented. Not a single one has found any fragments of human remains anywhere.
Yeah, I just think that's total bullshit.
Right?
It's so weird, though.
It is just a weird thing to say. Now, I get it. Maybe from, children have a tendency to look up to their parents. Maybe he looked up to his father in some sort of sick way. And in a way, by making up these lies, he was essentially bragging.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. Making himself more important.
Like more tough than his father.
Yeah, tougher and meaner.
Yeah.
And like the meanest guy ever.
To the fullest extent.
Yeah.
So much that he even disturbed the crime families.
Well, he just wanted to leave a legacy of something.
He really did.
Yeah. And
it really does seem like it. Now, Richard was eventually caught in a sting operation in 1986. He was recorded attempting to purchase cyanide to kill an undercover cop. He bought what he thought was the poison. He walked down the road a little bit until he found a stray dog, fed it to the stray dog, and when the dog didn't react, he realized, oh, okay, something's up. So he gets suspicious, and he decides to just go home. On his way home, he was reprimanded in a roadblock. So he was captured before he ever went home. He was charged with 5 counts of murder. 6 weapons violations, attempted murder, robbery, and attempted robbery. At the trial, all of his associates ratted on him, and in 1988, he was sentenced to a minimum of 60 years in prison. He later pled guilty to the murders of George Maliband and Louis Masquet, and sentenced to an additional 2 congruent life sentences.
Good. 60 years for 5 people is shit.
Right. I think that it's just evidence versus plea.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think that he lied so much they didn't want to risk it.
Right. Because you have to have evidence in order to...
So they just took what they could get.
Yeah, and if he says he did it, by golly, he did it.
And I mean, he was older by then. 60 years, he wouldn't have gotten out.
No. And I think that he knew that he had a heart condition. I mean, because this is the 80s. He probably didn't have a heart condition at this point, maybe, but I don't know.
He might have. He lived rough.
He did. He really
liked
did.
his drinking and his food.
He really did. And we don't know if he had any other health issues. He may have just, I definitely know
it was
he
the
killed
80s,
people.
so it was more cocaine than you would ever possibly dream of, I'm sure.
I don't think I could ever dream of the amount of cocaine that
went
was
around in
the 80s.
No.
The 80s was cocaine.
Cocaine and Aquanet.
That's right. But yeah, from there he got famous with the interviews in 1992, 2001, and 2003, and then he died of cardiac arrest in 2006. So yeah, he because he had heart disease, and so after 2006. It wasn't until like 2020 that a lot of this information started to surface.
That is true. I remember when it started coming out.
That he didn't actually do all of this. So there for a long time, it became like this infamous legend that this man just slaughtered 200 people without any evidence, without, getting caught, without so much as even a blood stain on a shirt, which if this were true... That would just be an incredible feat. Terrible,
honestly,
but...
I'm not like
how,
an award you want to win.
No.
But I don't think he killed that many, but I do think he killed quite a few people.
And I don't think that, if he were super intricately involved with the crime families, that they would say, oh, yeah, we know that guy.
No, why would they? That'd be stupid.
Exactly.
Of course they'd be like, what an asshole, he's a liar.
Right, but at the same time, the people that ratted on everybody, you would think that if they're ratting on everybody, they would rat on him too.
Then more of this would come out.
Somebody would have said something.
I agree.
Somebody would have mentioned something. He might have had like a nickname, but nothing. There was nothing. But we don't know because... The crime families are extremely intelligent, extremely interwoven, extremely, well organized.
I wouldn't call them intelligent necessarily, but they're compartmentalized.
The group works as an intelligence.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's what people don't understand is the compartmentalization in these crime families. Most people don't have very much information. Some people working with them don't even know they're doing illegal things.
Most things don't exit the room that they happened in.
No.
So there are, and plus, that's the day and age of, paperwork, right? So we see so many cases where, things get lost in paperwork. You put a body in a landfill, now we won't be able to solve the case. You put a body in a landfill in the 1980s, that case is never getting solved.
Fucked forever.
So... yeah, like I said, great assault. We don't know for sure. I personally want to take him at his word because just of the sheer details that he has.
Yeah, but man, so did all the other ones too.
Exactly.
Who lied like that.
Exactly.
It's not hard to make up a story.
Well, and sometimes having extreme details is an indicator of a lie.
Yes, it is, because that's not how memory works. You're not pulling up the extreme details. You're only pulling up the gist.
Right.
But you know what isn't the gist? Business
Shut the
time.
fuck up. Shut up,
Hey,
girl.
why don't you guys come on Discord and talk to me about this case, because it is fascinating.
I really want to know what you guys think, because again, we only have a handful of confirmed. Did he really kill all those homeless people? Did he really kill his high school bully?
I don't think so.
But the fact that he just stabbed his wife out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's nuts. It's possible.
I don't know, man.
But you know what else I know? is that our Patreon's really rad, and you should join it. There's like almost 200 episodes you haven't heard.
Yes, I'm about to release an episode.
What it's going to be about, like, entice us.
I'm really excited about this next one. It's not necessarily a true crime case. There is crime involved, but I don't have her name is a really hard to say last name. Her name's Marina. She's a performance artist. I'm sure many of you know who I'm talking about.
I have a weird connection to this person. Through a friend.
Really?
Yes.
Because I have bawled my eyes out to all of her famous performances.
I am friends with someone who owns some of her work.
I am really in love with her. And she's kind of like making a new round on TikTok. A lot of people have been talking about her on TikTok. And it just reminded me of her. And I just want to talk about her.
She was a part of the QAnon conspiracy, too. They were convinced she was like doing satanic rituals with like jizz or something.
I love her so much.
Yeah, she's really great. It probably was. But
I probably will cry, like, just warning, because I cry anytime I talk about her. I
already want to stick my head in a toilet. Anyway.
Yeah, so come join us on Patreon for that.
Yeah. If you're listening on YouTube, you do the things. Do the thumbs up.
Please,
do the notification bell, subscribe.
I know everybody says that, but it really helps more than you know.
Like, comment. Comment. Even if it's just, hi, Lily, and I will say hi back. I will. Additionally, leave a nice review is always helpful. And me and Maris, as you know, are writers. Y'all, okay, Maris isn't going to hear this, so I need to have a little powwow with you teabags. Gather round, come close. Unless you're driving, please do not do anything except drive. Maris is one of the most precious and darling human beings on the face of this earth.
He really is.
He is a genuinely kind and just loving soul. I mean, like all animals and children love him, and he struggles with suicidal depression. He's been doing better. He's been in therapy. He's been taking his meds, and he's been talking about his feelings. But you know what would really cheer him up? If people read his book, and he's giving it away for free. He just wants people to read it and tell him they like it. Yeah. And I am going to make so hard on that happen. Thing. He wrote it for me. And I would tell you it's probably one of the most beautiful books I've ever read.
You cried your eyes out for a while.
Oh, like a month.
Yeah.
And look, this isn't just wife bias, because you guys don't know me very well. Even if you listen to me, because I don't talk about my personal self too much. If you're in my Discord, you probably know me a little better. But I wouldn't be with Maris if he wasn't like massively talented, because it would cause me secondhand embarrassment.
And intelligence.
I don't feel embarrassment on my own, ever. So if someone puts that on me, if they put that stanky shit on me, I gotta fly away. So I will tell you right now, he is one of the most talented, beautiful souls out there. Please read his book. And if you want a copy, my email will be below, and the Discord for our writing will be in the description of this podcast.
You want to tell him what the book is? Or is
I'm going to give you a little brief rundown. Yeah. So
what's the title?
This is Terminus.
Oh, I haven't heard of this. What? I thought it was iDevil.
That's the sequel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I haven't heard you talk about this one.
Because we hadn't met when he had finished writing it. Oh. He finished writing it in 2016, right after we moved here. And he wrote iDevil for me too, of course, but because it's just the natural, y'all.
It's a sequel.
It's about the end of the world from the perspective of a single mom, a really cool African American woman who's dead, and a really gross politician who's also dead, and a fallen angel and the devil. And you'd think that it's going to be very typical of that type. No, it is one of the most wholesome, life-changing, sweetest stories you'll ever read. And it's very funny, deeply sad, and very hopeful. And everyone should read it. And I'm never going to shut up. In fact, if this is annoying, I don't care. Eat my ass. Eat the whole ass. Eat the whole thing. It's considerable, so you'll be here a while.
Goodness.
But I just want everyone to read it and tell Maris he's good so he can be happy, because that's what he deserves. It would make him happy. But if all you can do to support this podcast is listen, thank you. It's for you anyway. Yeah. If you want to buy me a cheeseburger at McDonald's, you can do that too. We'll have our link to our coffee. We could use some coffee, because I haven't slept in over 24 hours and I'm exhausted. it's just because I did a painting for a gallery show literally last minute.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah. It's my own fault.
Mm-hmm.
Just get me a coffee anyway. Anyway, love you. Goodbye.
Us on your social media platform of choice. Linktree/cruelty has all of the links. Check out our Patreon for exclusive episodes, merch, ad-free episodes, live ghost hunts, and much more. Please be sure to subscribe. New episodes are uploaded weekly. Thank you so much. See you next time. Music and production by Libby.